Hey everyone, in this video we're going to have a look at the difference between intra and intermolecular bonds. Now the prefixes intra and inter can be a little bit hard to distinguish, at least orally, so it's hard to really hear the difference. But there's a substantial difference between these two prefixes. Now if you want an extended treatment on how to distinguish the two, how they're different, this link here will be very handy for that. So I'll chuck that link in the description for this video. Let's go. So generally speaking, what intra refers to, the intra prefix, is if we look at the word, it means inside. Sorry, look at the prefix, it means inside or within. So a couple of examples could be intranet. If you've ever seen that word intranet, it refers to the network associated with one particular location. So it's like a company's own network or a school's internal network. On the other hand, we have inter. Now inter means between, and it involves two things. Like the word between presupposes that there are two different things. An example would be the internet. Now we connect our computer devices to other devices all across the world via the internet. So there's a connection between our device and other devices in the world. Now interstate as well, when we talk about interstate, we're talking about going from or being in one state and then being in another state, going to another state. So when we go interstate, we go from one state to another. So we're traveling between the two states. So hopefully I've shown you how to distinguish the two. I would say actually the best way to distinguish the two, like I've just done, is to think of examples of words that begin with those two prefixes. Okay, so it's really important that you can distinguish the two because it's easy to get confused. And if you're confused with the prefixes, you will not be able to really distinguish intramolecular bonds and intermolecular bonds. And like there's no way you could reliably determine where the intramolecular bonds and the intermolecular bonds are if you don't know how to distinguish the two prefixes. Okay, so let's have a look at the first of these learning goals here. Now we should recall that substances consisting of covalent bonds generally form molecules. So what do I mean by that? Well, if you look at a typical example of a covalently bonded substance such as water consists of 2 hydrogens and 1 oxygen. We would find here, so this is just a different way of drawing out the electron dot diagrams. Here, so the bonds here are represented with solid lines. So these two things mean the same thing. They're equivalent. We see that water here as a whole. Every atom involved has a full outer shell, and they don't really need to form any more bonds or gain any more electrons each to be any more stable than they already are. So water as a unit, this H2O unit here, and you could say another H2O unit elsewhere next door. Each of these are like, structures consisting of 2 or more atoms. Structures consisting of 2 or more atoms. Structures consisting of 2 or more atoms, and they have a specific or defined structure. So when you look at them, each of these, H2O with hydrogen atoms directly connected to the oxygens and not connected to each other in any way, these are defined structures consisting of 2 or more atoms. And this is what we mean when we call them molecules. You know, molecules are exactly these two definitions here, these 2 sub-definitions. We've got structures consisting of 2 or more atoms, in this case hydrogen, oxygen, and another hydrogen, and they have a specific defined structure, which is that the hydrogen atoms connect to or bond to the oxygens covalently. And each of these structures are I suppose, like distinct from each other. Like they don't connect to each other, at least directly. So these are the molecules here. These are the individual molecules. Individual molecules. Okay, so now that we've singled out what the individual molecules are, we can now start to talk about them in terms of these prefixes here were intramolecular bonds. So bonds within the molecule, and intermolecular bonds between molecules. So intramolecular bond is a bond within the molecule. Now, if you have a look at the water molecules that I've drawn and you look within the molecules, what bonds do we see? So if we look at this bottom water molecule that I've drawn, the bonds that we see, well, they're here, these 2 covalent bonds here. So these are the intramolecular bonds. Intramolecular bonds. And they happen to be, well, covalent bonds. Sorry, with my terrible handwriting. So intramolecular bonds, these are the covalent bonds. Okay, so those are the intramolecular bonds. Now, these molecules here, they also form bonds between each other. Now, water forms this kind of intermolecular bond. The hydrogen atoms usually interact with the electrons on the oxygen atoms. Now, we don't really cover this in junior chemistry, but you will look at this in VCE chemistry. So these interactions between certain atoms within molecules, these are the intermolecular bonds. More accurately, we call them intermolecular interactions, but at this stage, we'll just use the word bonds. That's fine. So you can see here that there are 2 distinct molecules here, this water molecule on top, and then this water molecule at the bottom. They're 2 separate molecules, but they do interact with each other via these intermolecular bonds, so these bonds between 2 different molecules. So just to reinforce that intermolecular bond, is a bond between 2 molecules. Okay, so here it is. So we've identified the intramolecular bonds in a molecule, and we've also identified an intermolecular bond. So hopefully from this video you can recall how it is that substances that consisting of covalent bonds, they generally form molecules. That is, these distinct structures consisting of 2 or more atoms. They're defined in their structure, so there's a very particular way that the atoms are arranged, and that you can distinguish between the intra prefix and the inter prefix, and also identify the intramolecular bonds and intermolecular bonds. Alright guys, thanks for watching this video. Hope this helped.